Decoupling from China is proving to be self-destructive, so claims founder and chairperson of the German think tank, the Schiller Institute, Helga Zepp-LaRouche. Can she back it up? And how can Africans tell their true stories in a smart way? My exclusive with Kwesi Pratt, founder of Pan-Africa Television. Welcome to a special edition of The Point with me, Liu Xin, coming to you from Beijing. Decoupling from China is self-destructive, so says Helga Zepp-LaRouche, founder and chairperson of the German think tank, the Schiller Institute. She calls the idea a geopolitical plot, which amounts to economic suicide for Germany, with the European Union and the world economy suffering the consequences. If decoupling from China will lead to further damage, what are her thoughts on the so-called alternative approach of de-risking with China? And as the new Silk Road lady, how does she rate the BRI 10 years on? Has it proven to be the new world land bridge like the ancient ones? I'm pleased to be joined from Beijing by Helga Zepp-LaRouche. Ms. Zepp-LaRouche, welcome to The Point. You have said on various occasions that to decouple from China, there will be potentially enormous cost. What exactly do you mean by that? How enormous would the cost be?
Well, first of all, I don't think it's very practical given the fact that the economies both between Europe and China and the United States and China are so interwoven that, it's like cutting your own hand off when you do that. Furthermore, I think that, the Western financial system is in a terrible condition. Bloomberg recently mentioned that 4,800 US firms, banks, half of them are bankrupt. The US debt may default, and then that would lead to a worldwide panic, unemployment, and so on. I think we are sitting on a powder keg. I think if this policy is continued, the real losers will be the West, because the Western financial system is bankrupt, while other countries like China are based much more on physical economy. Therefore, they would survive such a situation much, much better. But you can see in the case of Russia, where the sanctions completely backfired. It was not Russia which suffered. Now Germany is being deindustrialized as a result, and Russia is doing relatively well. So I think this policy is completely foolish, and the people who are pushing decoupling are economically, extremely stupid.
If it is so stupid, where do you think the whole talk of decoupling come from? Are European businesses and European politicians really towing the talking points, copying the talking points from the United States?
Well, yes, Europe at this point, with very few exceptions like President Macron, lost all independence. And what the European governments are doing is totally against the interest of the industry. The German industry now starts very timidly to protest and say that they need the cooperation with China. But it comes from, from the geopolitical determination to, crush Russia. I think that is not too strong a word. And to, after they would succeed to do that with Russia, then the next would be China. So I think it's part of the confrontation policy coming from the West right now.
Now, trade between China and Germany soared to 300 billion euros last year, making China Germany's number one or main trading partner for the 7th consecutive year. But somehow, some people are calling this economic dependency. Do you think that is the case? And how to explain this mentality that a lot of trade necessarily puts you in a disadvantaged position?
I think that is sophistry, look, when you have a functioning world economy, countries cooperate. Germany has benefited tremendously from cooperating with China. Without the Chinese economy being de facto the motor of the world economy, the world would be in a much worse state. So it's sophistry. I think the people who are saying these things are just lying. It has no reality in economic fact. And right now, Germany is completely dependent on the United States. We are now buying energy which is 3 times more expensive than the Russian gas in the form of American LNG. The American legislation, the Inflation Reduction Act, causes firms to leave Germany and invest in the United States because otherwise they can't survive. So Germany is becoming dependent more and more from the United States and not from China. So people should not always believe the formulations which are being used because they have an intention almost all the time.
Is that why in one of the recent events you were cautioning against a Great Depression coming up, and you were also calling that politicians, for instance, across the Atlantic are sleepwalking, and the mass media are almost doing a criminal job in their effort to distract people, to use disinformation to convince people that the world is very different than it actually is. Is that what you're talking about here?
Well, I know from many personal discussions that in the establishment in the West, many people on the top know perfectly well that the casino economy is finished, that it's bankrupt, that the policy of profit maximization for decades has been at the disadvantage of the real economy. The rich became richer, billionaires became more, millionaires became more, but the billions of people have become poor, and that system cannot be sustained. So for those in the know, and there are some top executives in the banking sector and the financial sector who know perfectly well that the present condition of the financial system is such that it could blow out, triggered by some bankruptcy like First Republic Bank in America or New Silicon Valley or the Credit Suisse in Switzerland. Switzerland is now sitting on a huge mega bank because UBS has taken over Credit Suisse, which is a tremendous vulnerability to the Swiss economy. So this could blow at an instant, and the people who know that are continuing the game, and I call that criminal.
To solve the problem, some people propose the idea of de-risking, as if that is the way to go forward. Instead of decoupling, they are now talking about de-risking being the approach forward. What is your opinion on that?
Well, I have not found anybody yet who could explain what the actual difference is between decoupling and de-risking. I mean, it's basically the same thing, because it's the idea to isolate China, to go to countries which are not China, but you cannot. I mean, China has an incredible advantage in terms of infrastructure, in terms of skilled labor, in terms of an enormous a success story of modernization. If you go to certain centers like Shenzhen, this is the state of the art in many technologies. You cannot go to any country which doesn't have these preconditions and think you can de-risk by investing in these other countries. I think it's an effort to contain China, and it will not work. I think it's a very foolish thing.
Do you see, however, that there is any legitimacy in the kind of concerns expressed by the business community and sometimes by the political establishment about doing business with China being unbalanced? Do you see any elements of that? If so, what do you think is the right approach to address these problems?
Well, I studied the economic meeting which took place last December, where Xi Jinping basically reset the strategy for having trade with other countries, and there is more opening up, more focus on allowing foreign investment. I think all of these arguments don't hold when you start to look at it in reality. Naturally, one can always say there could be better conditions, but I think Take, for example, the new development bank, which now was opened in Shanghai, where Dilma Rousseff is the new director. President Lula, when he was in China, he said this could become the great new bank of the global south. Now, if the West would be smart, they would somehow cooperate with these kinds of initiatives in the development of the global south, because that is the future markets. Africa, for example, will have 2.5 billion people by the year 2050. Now, if we want to have a peaceful world, European nations and even the United States would say, let's cooperate with China in developing these continents, Africa, Latin America, those parts of Asia which are not developed, even Europe has parts which are not yet developed. Let's concentrate on the joint projects, joint ventures, and everybody would have an advantage. But it would require a different mindset on the part of the West.
Do you think that kind of mindset can settle in anytime soon, given the current geopolitical tension that we're seeing from the West?
Well, I think normally he would say no, because the establishments are quite hardened in their view. But you have right now a situation where both in the United States and in Europe, the policies of the governments are not taking into account the interests of the people anymore. Take, for example, the fact that the German government did not protest that in all probability it was the US administration which blew up the Nord Stream pipelines. I mean, the investigative journalist Seymour Hersh has given absolute evidence for that. We discussed with many military experts in Europe, in different countries, who all confirm that that is the only possible explanation. Did the German government protest at least to the American government? No. But who pays the bill? It's the ordinary people who have now to pay much more for energy, cost of life. And that's just one example of many, many. So I think that we are heading towards a situation where sudden changes will offer opportunities to indeed completely change the parameters and also the attitude of the majority of the people.
You're known to many as the new Silk Road lady. As we celebrate the 10th anniversary of the idea of Belt and Road Initiative, do you think this initiative has made the kind of impacts it was expected of? And concerning the various Western concerns associated with this initiative so far, such as high debts, what are your thoughts?
Well, I think that the 10 years of Belt and Road Initiative have completely transformed the world. For example, the countries of the global south have now a new self-confidence that with the collaboration with China and the Belt and Road, that they can finally overcome colonialism, poverty, underdevelopment. And I have seen in the recent period a complete new self-confidence, which is expressed, for example, in the fact that the BRICS countries have 19 applications for membership. Many organizations of the global south are now saying they need to take a stronger voice in the shaping of the world because they represent the majority of the human species. And that, I think, is only to be explained because the Belt and Road Initiative exists and many fantastic projects have been realized, like the China-Pakistan corridor or the fast train between Jakarta and Bandung in Indonesia, or the fast train between Laos and Kunming, and many, many other such projects. So I think this is really not to be stopped, and no matter what the West is trying to do, I think that they have lost the game, and China has proven that they do indeed something in the interest of the developing countries, and that the win-win policy is much superior than the policy of trying to suppress others.
However, to proceed, to go forward and to avoid the kind of scenario that you have warned, which is the world falling into two blocks, one led by one represented by the US-led West and the other Russia, China, and the global South. To avoid this scenario, what do you think China needs to do in order to proceed to create that kind of win-win?
Well, I think that the three initiatives by President Xi Jinping, the Global Security Initiative, Global Development Initiative, and Global Civilizational Initiative, together as a package, are the key to solve the situation, because we need the new global security and development architecture, which takes into account the interest of every single country on the planet. And the only kind of global thinking doing that comes really from these three initiatives. So I think that that must be discussed much stronger. I would suggest that China should organize a lot of conferences inviting leaders of the global South to express their view. And I'm sure that then, this will have an impact on the people in Germany, in Italy, in France, because they do not know what the view is of the leaders of the global South, of the people of the global South. And there must be found a way of breaking that, because if you have only the opinion of the people, and the people really knew what is at stake, I think they would come to the right conclusion, because I believe that fundamentally, man is good.
All right, we have to leave at that time being very limited. Many thanks to founder and chairperson of the German think tank, the Schiller Institute, Helga Zepp-LaRouche, joining me from Beijing. When we come back, my exclusive interview with Kwesi Pratt, founder of Pan-Africa Television. What is his understanding of the true African story, and how is he challenging prevailing Western narratives?